mo programa zetu moambo dhengera selma konora hetatu imwe ndatu heari hamano tano oneari Eagle FM the eye. My friend, why do you
Lipuranengelo wapumbwa Eva tere ulikoni maundu tutoingida ashike kapeno nweku dite opoye ekukulile oshafafana nongeshe faili meholamo ihoetike kovano ile koshiwana onongeshe fa yapumbwa kukaraya kovano okupitiramo Eagle FM otuna ebitoda njuka okukwetera oipindi konu kondado nawa nuneudo otukwetera o special ngeta shake ngeshe fa omarudi dayo loka opone ushendi fenawa nokumona oijamwili nawa ningepata fanona monika ko Eagle FM onora etatu imwe mbali heali nola natu heali bali no heali ile komberewa nora hetatu natu bali o hetatu batatu o mafelane Eagle FM the eye.
Eagle FM lets you express your constitutional rights of freedom of expression without fear of favor.
This is actually, to put it mildly, an economic scandal.
Fraud. So
not fraud, it's a scandal. Why do you give a tender to somebody who does not have capacity to build? Why should you do that? You know a person that does not have a capacity to build.
Eagle FM lets you talk.
That's why I'm always telling people in Parliament, let me not take up my Katatura menace.
Right.
Because I grew up in Katatura. And I will not hesitate to tell you off if it is needed to do.
Be part of the debate by setting the agenda.
My response in terms of Rwanda at 6% is that we had been there before. We've had 6% growth before. It's not something that Namibia has not achieved in the past, and it's not something Namibia will not be able to achieve in the future.
Eagle FM, the eye.
You are now listening to The Home Run with Helmut and Dwight, weekdays from 4:30 to 6, only on Eagle FM. Download the app or tune in to a frequency near you. Tune in to The Home Run with Helmut and Dwight on your number one talk radio station Eagle FM and be part of an in-depth discussion on events you didn't know you needed to hear until you do. From Namibia, Africa and around the world. Tune in from Monday to Friday from 4:30 to 6 p.m. only on Eagle FM.
Lipuranengelo wapumbwa Eva tere ulikoni maundu tutoingida ashike kapeno nweku dite opoye ekukulile oshafafana nongeshe faili meholamo ihoetike kovano ile koshiwana onongeshe fa yapumbwa kukaraya kovano okupitiramo Eagle FM otuna ebitoda njuka okukwetera oipindi konu kondado nawa nuneudo otukwetera o special ngeta shake ngeshe fa omarudi dayo loka opone ushendi fenawa nokumona oijamwili nawa ningepata fanona monika ko Eagle FM onora etatu imwe mbali heali nola natu heali bali no heali ile komberewa nora hetatu natu bali o hetatu batatu o mafelane Eagle FM the eye.
Eagle FM lets you express your constitutional rights of freedom of expression without fear of favor.
This is actually, to put it mildly, an economic scandal.
Fraud. So
not fraud, it's a scandal. Why do you give a tender to somebody who does not have capacity to build? Why should you do that? You know a person that does not have a capacity to build.
Eagle FM lets you talk.
That's why I'm always telling people in Parliament, let me not take up my Katatura menace.
Right.
Because I grew up in Katatura. And I will not hesitate to tell you off if it is needed to do.
Be part of the debate by setting the agenda.
My response
And good day, good afternoon, dear listeners, wherever you find yourself. This is The Home Run, specifically where we obviously, we try to avoid the comedy, but the comedy always, does its best to sneak in and does bring some format of comic relief into our conversation, as we always do here on The Home Run. Now, I'll be joined a little bit later by my co-host, as always, what we always do, my partner in crime, that being Helmut. And then we obviously will be taking the particular dissection that we're looking at, the HARDAP region for today. We're weighing it. We are literally weighing it like, like someone tries to weigh water. which is obviously a monumental task depending on the weight and the size and the particular volume that you're trying to measure. However, I will start off with a very, very, very particularly good point that Governor McNabb actually cited back in his State of the Region address. He obviously started, just to jog your memories for you, those of you that had the opportunity of seeing it. He obviously started with some of the particular disaster relief responses during the past year up until his particular address, which was done in June. And he also had the opportunity, to look at certain particular of the societal interventions that the region also, that was part of his sort of like starting chapter that began from that point. But I'm actually going to jump out of that because I'm going to get into the formal human development dimension that he did actually, make a case for. Now, this ties into an interesting conversation that began not earlier this week, back in last week, actually the week before in July, which stems from a parliamentary debate that took place in the Parliament of New Zealand. Yes. I'm citing an engagement that obviously began from a New Zealand or a Kiwi perspective. Now, what was interesting about this, which ties into what Governor McNabb also cited or highlighted in the starting point of his address, is there was a key particular engagement that the governor made reference to, and this engagement specifically was based upon information dissemination within the region of HARDAP, or within the HARDAP region. And the information dissemination exercise contained the use of local, or let me rather say mother tongue or vernaculars, all the other multiple phrases or terms that you can use to describe people technically who would like to hear information about developments in the region and developments across the country and how this impacts them in their mother tongue. He started off on one of the points in that direction, citing that there was a specific kind of a communication center that was set up by the Ministry of ICT in the region, in Marindal, in the Regional Authority office, which aims to empower information dissemination about major developments in the country, as well as also how this impacts people in the region. And when he cited the particular point that extensive translatory work was done in terms of converting from English into mother tongues in the region, I sat there thinking to myself, you know what? This is actually a particularly good point that needs to be dissected a little bit more across the country, in terms of how, yes, you can have English as the medium that officially records, information in various particular developments in the country in English, but English should not be the medium technically that waters down the strength of the various languages in the country, the various languages that are identified as part of the indigenous landscape. And we did an indigenous language dissection last year, that specifically Helmut and myself on the homework. We did that last year, specifically dissecting the impact, the resilience, the protection coming through from UNESCO's particular aspect in terms of the decade of indigenous language protections, and how you work from there as a country in terms of preserving languages within your border, because of the I'll describe what English technically is. English is very trendy. It is very enticing. It does make people in some way, if you've not noticed it ever before, how people sit there wondering how eloquent it is for Dwight to sound like he's speaking the king's language all the way here in Southern Africa. Yeah, but I mean, it still doesn't make me a better person than you, because primarily I just speak English better. we won't debate that part. That's a subjective, dimension that we might, a rabbit hole that we might trip and fall into. But from the governor's perspective, the connecting point that I'm making to the Kiwi Parliament from 2 weeks ago was a very famous internet video clip of about 4 minutes, because I watched the full 4 minutes yesterday, because I was trying to find it, the full 4 minutes of this debate contribution in the New Zealand Parliament, done by a member of Parliament, an MP, whose name is Tamantha, or is it? Yeah, Tamantha. Yeah. But anyway, so this MP, she stood up and actually challenged or countered the particular discussion, on the current bill that they were busy debating in the New Zealand Parliament. And the bill that was being put up, and according to her testimony, which was submitted between another crucial bill and another bill on affordable housing, to help affordable housing market in New Zealand, was the bill on making English the official language of New Zealand. And a lot of the if I can call them sort of like indigenous New Zealanders, but in terms of my explanation of indigenous, if you could prove that your family has been there for more than 100 years in that particular territory, then you technically qualify as indigenous already. But she stood up because she's a Maori member of Parliament, and she stood up and she cited specifically that it was a nonsense bill that they were busy debating. And primarily she went in this particular explainer in her particular counter argument regarding the bill, whether the bill should be entertained or not, this bill to make English a official language of New Zealand, because it was in protest, because there's there are two factions technically in the New Zealand lawmaking dimension regarding whether recognizing Maori and any other Polynesian language on the same level as English, or to elevate English, like what happened in Namibia, to make English sort of like the sort of like focal official language of government and any other official platform, and thus relegating any other languages in that particular country to just being contained at home and any other particular spaces, and not to be entertained. And just as well, Helmut is getting comfortable. Helmut, how you doing? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Links. Good afternoon, listeners. I'm glad I caught you on the whole languages part.
Yeah.
Because...
No, but I'm measuring this up against. Remember the video I showed you of the New Zealand MP? You and David.
Yeah.
Because I actually measured it on. I actually compare the two in terms of the good work that the governor started off, because that was in his introduction.
Yeah.
The good work of disseminating information regarding national development and national interest in the region, in mother tongue, mediums, so that everybody is up to date.
Gets a picture of what's going on here.
And when I showed you that video, I actually went and looked for that full video of that New Zealand MP.